Hi everybody, Dave Soden here, and I want to talk to you today about 3 powerful ways to implement choices inside of your Powerapps application. And to begin, let's look at some of the built-in choice or choices or the ways of doing it. And let's discuss the pros and cons of each of these 3 ways. So obviously the choices option is the default Microsoft Powerapps way, right? And because of that, it's well documented, and the benefit of this is that it's part of the Dataverse, and so basically any application can consume it. Now let's talk about some of the cons. If you use this approach, only developer can change or make changes to your choice columns or your choice dropdowns. That means that anytime somebody wants to add something, change something, delete something, a developer or somebody with access to the environment, specifically the Dataverse that this application lives in, will have to make those changes. You also have to then, once you've decided to make a choice or a group of choices, they used to be called option sets, but after you've done that, you need to bound that off to a schema so that you can go ahead and use and consume it in the Power App. Also, it's a little bit complicated to set up because you kind of got to, like I said, you got to do your option set, then you got to bind it to a table or a schema, and so it's not as easy or straightforward. Here's a really great choice, and I see a lot of people doing this, and I often tell people to do this as well. It's called Table as a Choice. Instead of doing the built-in version, you just simply create a table inside of Dataverse, and this table will hold each and every one of your choices as a row. And so because of that, it's super flexible, and it's easy to use. Also, any application can use it, and because it's simply just a table, it's like any other data table. You can manage choice options inside of your applications. This means you can have an administrative page, and users of the application, if you had an administrative area for your app, could actually go in and manage these choices internally. It's also ALM friendly, and that's because it's a table, and tables can be bound to a solution, and solutions can easily be migrated with the app. So you can move this across environments. The other thing that we need to talk about is that there are some cons that go along with this. And so because choice is a table and each dropdown potentially is its own table, you'll need to have a connection to each of those tables. And so if you have a whole bunch of dropdowns, say in your application of, I don't know, something ridiculous, maybe 20, 25, 30, then this is going to be a problem for you. You really, in the best practices, should limit or try to limit it to 5 tables or less for this option. Obviously, you can use 10 or 15. All I can tell you is that this is a best practice type of suggestion, just to make sure you don't run into any problems. You'll have to test to find out what your theoretical limit is for the app, for your environment, and the tolerance of your users. Okay, let's move on to the third and the final choice. And this is not apparently so clear because this is some advanced architecture on how to do table as a choice. We're going to use a single table as a choice. And so the pros are pretty much all of the same, but one of the biggest ones is that one table will hold all of your choices that you come up with. Instead of a choice option being as a row, each row in this table simply is going to represent one individual dropdown. And so its values are all going to be stored in a single cell. Because of that, one connection is needed. It's super flexible. Also, any app can use it. The same benefits that you get with being able to manage those choices inside of an app. It's ALM friendly, and it also moves with solution. Because it's a single table, it's even easier on your ALM strategy. Now let's talk about some of the cons. It is much harder to code initially, but it may well be worth doing this because of the ALM strategy alone. So larger companies should really consider this architecture choice type. It's also used to, again, hold each of your choices as in a single cell, right? And so it's an array. Just think of a comma-separated list, and each one of those items in the list, is a choice that you're going to use in your dropdown. And so because of that, you're going to have to use extensively the split function, which will convert that array into a table. And then on the flip side, when you want to store information back into the database, you'll have to concat that string back into, a single value so that it can be stored off in that table. So without any further ado, let's get in and show you inside of Powerapps how to use each one of these choices. So now what we want to do is look at what the default first option in your choices are. Okay, so this is the built-in way of doing it. So if we come over here, if we're in the make.powerapps experience, and we twirl open this data area, we can see tables and we can see choices. So the way to think of this, if you've not used the built-in choices before, I'll go ahead and go through this, although I don't want to spend a whole lot of time because, like I said, it is well documented, but it is super confusing, and this is why I tell people maybe consider table as a choice as opposed to using choices, just because of the complexity and the manageability of needing to have access to this interface in order to make the changes. So the first thing you need to do is create what used to be called, and I do like the old name option sets because it was a clear delineation between the names. Option set and choice, they were two separate things. Now you have confusion around choices and choice, and it gets really screwed up really fast. So when you're creating an option set, so I guess the way to think of this now is choices is plural. Plural means more than one choice, so you have choices, okay? So that's what this is. The plural is where you're defining your group or set of options or set of choices. And so I have one here. If I click on it, I have item A, item B, item C, and then I put this text in here. It says item from choice object, which is this choices area, okay? So now that you've gone ahead and created one of these, now what you need to do is bind it to a table. And so you simply do that by adding a column, and you come over here and you come down here to choice and choices. So essentially just choose choices, plural, okay? And so then you come over here and you use your drop down. And so this is where I can choose the example choice. And then from there, if I go in and edit choice, you can see that that's where we were earlier. And so I've already gone ahead and done this already. And you can see this right here. Do I want to? Yes, I want to close the panel. And so I already have this column called example table choice. Now I did use the word example table choice. That way I know that this particular column is bound to the choices, or what, again, I'm going to keep using the old name because I really like it. It's how you can keep it straight in your head. This old option set, which is now called choices. So that's why I put table choice in there, so I know which one is the table column name versus which one is the actual choices name. And this will get a little bit more clear when we get into building an app. So let's just go ahead and create a new app. Let's do a canvas, let's do a table layout, and let's throw a single drop-down control and then try to get it to populate from the choices. So we'll go to Insert, Input, and Drop Down. Okay, so each drop-down comes with a drop-down sample data. Okay, you get 1, 2, 3. No, a big deal. So the first thing you might be inclined to do is to try to bind it to the table that you just set up, right? And so I don't have any connections established particularly, but I'm going to pick my LabRat table, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do example choices, right? And so I come down over here and I'm seeing that it's pointing to the correct column. And now if I go to try to play the app and hit the drop down, lo and behold, there's no data. You're like, what is going on? So let's click into here. Let's go ahead and click name. And then all of a sudden magically, and by the way, if you hit Alt, you can actually emulate the play mode. And so anyway, without having to hit play. So I'm pressing and holding the Alt key while I'm doing this. In any event, now I can see that there's values. But if I change it back to the other column name, which is my example, and then press and hold Alt, I get nothing. So what's going on? And the reason for this is you have to use this function called choices. And so when I do that, I use the function called choices. And if I do LabRat data, which is my data value, or my table, and do a dot so that I can get to my column names, if I keep scrolling down till I get to example and I use it this way, but now I'm using it inside of the function. And now all of a sudden I've got access to the data that I expected. But there's yet another confusing way. When you use the choices function, not only can you use the table name dot column name, but you can actually use the choices, which is the option set name. So if I just type in EX, I can actually get to the example choice. And it's because it's seeing it through the fact that it's bound to the schema, the table, LabRat data. And so it kind of knows that it sees that, and so I can just use the short syntax. So as long as it's schema bound and you've got a connection to a table, this choices function is smart enough to know how to go through or go around the backdoor to get to the object name as it exists or existed in choices. So if I come back over here to choices and I see example choice, I can use that example choice over here in my function, and I still get the same functionality. It's a little bit cleaner. Okay, so that is option number one. Let's move on to table as a choice in the next section. Okay, now let's look at the second option, which is the table as choice. So if we come over here to table and we go into table as choice, we see all of the columns. And if I change default to just the custom columns that we added, there isn't anything really in here. I didn't add anything here because name is the default primary column name anyway. And so all I did was gone ahead and I added a row for each one of the drop downs. Okay, so it's a simple table. And let's go ahead and create a Power App. And let's go into New App. Let's go into Canvas. Let's go to Table Layout. And so let's quickly note the name of the table again. Okay, so it's called Table as Choice. So let's go in and to our app and let's drop in another one of these drop downs. Okay, here we go. And again, we've got the standard default drop down sample. And so what we want to do is we're going to wipe that out. And so let's come over here to items. And it's going to look at the table. Let's search all table, and here's table as choice. And now that we have table as choice, that's all we have to do because it has the default name. And so it picks up on name, and that's it, guys. That's all you have to do to implement it. And because it is, already a table, I do table as choices, and you can see that I can use it in the table object. And I can get all my names in there. And so if I come over to the table area, edit the fields, maybe I don't want this created on field, and just remove it, right? And so let's shrink this up a little bit and move this over. We can use it in a table object. We can also pop up a gallery on screen here, right? And so let's click on Edit, Table as Choices, and let's just go ahead and add a label. And then let's bind this label to, actually let's bind the gallery to table as choices. We go to edit name, that's good there, item A. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So now we have our gallery. And the gallery is listed here. So you can see this is really, really easy to use. Table as choice. Again, super easy to use, probably the easiest of all options, and because you can edit it within the application, the benefit is huge to maybe some complex requirements. Also, the ALM strategy comes into play. It moves with the solution. So table as choice, this is absolutely fantastic. But again, be careful, don't add too many of these to your app, because each and every time you add a connection to your app, then you're going to run into an issue. So what I also want to show you is this Microsoft document, and this is tips and best practices to improve the performance of your Canvas app. And right here you'll notice that the limit data connections, and it says don't connect more than 30 data sources from the same app. Okay, so you can see you could very easily have a very complicated app, and if you use table as choice for each and every one of those, those choice options, and you had say 20, 15, 20 drop downs in your entire application, you're going to have 15, 20 connections plus the original connection and any other connections that you have. And you can see that you can very easily hit this 30 data source area, which is why I said to limit it to 5. Okay, so let's move on to the third and the final option, which is obviously a lot more complicated, but will definitely bring this all within scope. Okay, we'll see you in the next section. Okay guys, here is the final step into this video, which is the third and final option. And here we are in the app, and I'm starting in the app because I want to show you a couple things. So this is the goal in step 3, right? Never mind the code, we're going to go over this in just a minute. But this is the item that is in this control. But I want you to take notice the name of my control, right? And then I want you to take notice of each of the options that I have in my dropdown. So I got item 2A, item 2B, item 2C, and so on. And the name of my control is myDropDownFieldTwo. Now I want to drop over into this table that I already have. So if I come back out to tables, this is the table. tblDropExample, right? And I have 2 fields that's in this table. Now these are filtered by custom, because if I change it back to all, this is what Dataverse tries to be helpful by giving a bunch of additional information, which it is helpful. But in this particular coding use case, it's noise, and it can cause performance problems because we don't need all of that information when we're doing what we're trying to do here. So it's very important to just bring back essentially the 2 columns that we're going to be dealing with, which is, unfortunately not managed, custom, are these 2. So this is the drop name and the drop value. So let's look at the data. I have 2 rows of data in this table. And so on the column drop name, you'll see this is the name of my control. Think of it as key value pair. And then over here, I have my values, and each of the values is split or separated by a pipe. And so that's essentially what we're going to do, is we're going to split this up, this string array, by using the split function, which will take a string like this, and it will split it into a table on the delimiter, which in this case is going to be the pipe symbol. And so now let's jump back over into the Power App. Now that you understand the table structure, I have a singular connection to the table, and that's all you need. And this will power every single drop down in this app and every single drop down in any other app by just adding the 1 connection. But to get to the goal, I wanted to kind of walk you through each and every one of the areas here of this particular app. And think about it in steps, if we were to take baby steps. So the first thing I'm using here is this data table. And this data table, all I want to do is I want to bring back essentially some information. But I want to just get a row out of the table. I don't want to bring back the entire table. So how do I do that? I do that by using the search function. And the search function will allow me to search a particular column for a particular value. So in this case, I want to search this table, and I'll get back to ShowColumns in a second. But I want to search this table, specifically this column, and that's the value, because that's the name of my control. And when I do that, I'm going to get a single record back, which is what you see here. Now, if I go to the data table and I go to edit fields and I go to add a field, you see that I'm showing the 1 field, right? Data drop value, but I also have data drop name is available as well. And so that is a result of me doing the show columns. So I'm doing show columns for that particular table, and I'm only specifying the columns that I want to bring back. Remember all that noise I said that was included inside of the column? So if I go back to all, I don't want all of this junk. It's going to slow down the performance of my app. I want a nice, super optimized query, and I don't want to bring back a bunch of erroneous data that I absolutely don't need. So that's why I'm using the show columns, and that's what show columns will do for you. So at the end of the day, I now have a table, and in that table, I'm only showing 1 of the records, specifically a column in that record. And that's all well and good, but let's click into this again. If you're not used to using this, this is going to be your new best friend if you've not used it like this, or maybe you saw it there, but you've ignored it and you didn't really know much about what it is. Look at what this query or this code is doing for you. It's bringing back a table object. And so you want to use a table object with a table control. Similarly, if we click on this label or text field, we can see if we click into it that its type is text. And so that's what we need. We need text for a text box or text control or input control. But watch what happens when I remove this singular column name. It will change from being text to a record. And now I'm going to get an error. And so you got to match up the object that, you're going to write some code and it's going to return something, an object. And so you've got to make sure you're using the right object with the right control or you're going to get an error. And so if you're ever in doubt and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on, just use a period. And if you see something come back like this, IntelliSense will say, hey, there's additional information you have to choose here. Go ahead and, pop it in there and let's see what you get. And so there you go. You've got, this table value. Okay. And so now this is exactly what we want. So now that we actually have a single piece of text, we can finally use another function inside of all of this gobbledygook, and we're going to see that here. We're now going to split that text on this separator, which is the pipe symbol. And so that's all the split does. It takes two pieces of information. It says, give me the source of the information of what you want to split, which is essentially, all this first part. And then, what's the separator? Okay, I want to use the pipe symbol as the separator. And what it returns at the end of the day is a table. It returns a table for us. And so the drop-down needs a table, and a table preferably with a single list of items in it. And so that's exactly what we're doing here. Now, conversely, if for some reason you wanted to say take this, and let's just say you had a management administrative console. Now think that they're going through and they're editing and adding rows to a table and a collection, and you want to loop and iterate through that table to store this value back off into the database as a singular value. So I'm going to do some emulation here. I'm going to take this because it returns a table object. And so now what I want to do is do the reverse. I want to take this and I want to turn it back into a string so that maybe I can patch or save it off into the database. So you do that using the CONCAT function, okay? So the CONCAT, not concatenate, because concatenate joins several text values into one text value, and that's not what we want here. We want this other one, and it joins all of the values in this sense from a table, and we're going to put it into a text value here. And so we also have the option or opportunity to give off a separator. So let's see what this looks like. So the first item it wants is a table. So this is where you kind of point it to your collection, which is the table, and you say, I want you to take this table and I want you to split it using a specific separator, and then what I want you to do is give me that value, and it's going to be a single text value. So let's provide the table, and now let's do a comma to get to the next part. So at this point I want the result. I want the result of that item in the table. And so now that I have that, if I add a comma, now I have the opportunity to, it shouldn't have been a result. That's not exactly what I wanted. I misspoke. Okay, so I want the result of that. I used a period. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, so now I got the separator. So now if I go ahead and add in, I don't know, let's just add a star as opposed to a pipe. Okay, and so what you'll see now is I'm going to take that table and the result, which is essentially the value that I want to have returned out of that table, and then I specify the separator. I now have another piece of string, which is a text, which is data type text, to use in the text field. I can now store and patch this back off into the database. So you can see on the administrative side how you can very flexibly use all of that to interchangeably use concat and split to use this architecture design. Again, kind of a coding nightmare. Once you get used to the idea and the complexity of it and you can wrap your head around it, then this becomes a very extremely powerful tool to take your apps and your performance up to the next level. I hope this video was very helpful for you. I'll put a lot of the coding examples in the description to the video below, and I hope that you start using your table as choice, where you're using one table And if you don't, at least now you know your 3 options to use table as a choice. My name is David. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.